Okay, so you own a private jet. Or maybe you're rich enough that you're about to buy one. Either way, you assume the hard part is over. You sign the papers, the jet is yours, and now it just works. You call, it shows up, you fly. That's the mental model almost everyone starts with. It's also completely wrong. Most owners fly their own airplane somewhere between 200 and 400 hours a year, out of 8,760 hours in a year. Do that math and the airplane is sitting in a hangar more than 90% of the time, and every single one of those idle hours still costs money. Insurance doesn't pause. Pilots don't stop getting paid. The airplane doesn't stop aging. So almost nobody runs their own jet themselves. They hire a management company to do it. And here's the part that surprises people. The management company usually doesn't own the airplane either. They're running a fleet of other people's multi-million-dollar machines, carrying the operational risk, the safety liability, and the regulatory exposure, without ever holding the deed to a single one of them. From the outside, this looks like a luxury concierge business. Rich people, leather seats, champagne on ice. From the inside, it behaves like a regulated logistics operation with airline-level compliance rules, thin margins, and constant exposure to disaster. Somewhere between a management fee of a few $1,000s a month and a charter bill running into the tens of thousands per flight, most of the money disappears before it ever becomes profit. So where does it actually go? Let's go inside, say you're the owner. You've got a long-range jet, something in the $25 to $70 million range, and you want to keep it simple. Hire your own pilots, your own mechanic, run your own little flight department. Sounds clean, here's the problem. The moment you fly your own airplane for your own personal or corporate use, you're operating under something the FAA calls Part 91. Under Part 91, you can fly whenever and wherever you want with fairly relaxed rules around crew rest and airport access. But there's a catch baked into the rule itself. You are not allowed to accept money from anyone else to fly on your airplane. Not $1. Which means every hour it sits idle, it earns nothing. It's a pure cost center. Full stop. If you want that airplane to make money for you when you're not using it, it has to go on what's called a Part 135 certificate, the same regulatory category commercial charter operators fly under. That unlocks third-party revenue, but it also unlocks a mountain of obligations, mandatory safety filings, continuous maintenance tracking, strict rules about how long a pilot can be on duty, and constant oversight. Now think about what it costs to run that yourself. You need at least 2 to 4 type-rated pilots, a director of maintenance, someone handling safety compliance, someone dispatching the airplane. Add up base salaries, health insurance, loss of license coverage, mandatory simulator training, scheduling software, and hangar space, and you're well past $1 million a year in fixed overhead before the airplane leaves the ground a single time. A management company solves this the same way an airline solves it: scale. A firm running 20 to 100 aircraft spreads that exact same fixed overhead, the compliance staff, the dispatchers, the safety officers, across every airplane in the fleet. Suddenly, the same infrastructure that costs you $1 million alone costs a fraction of that per tail. The management company becomes your CFO, your HR department, your dispatcher, and your compliance officer all in one contract. But before any of that, you have to decide what kind of airplane you're bringing into this system, and the tiers matter more than most first-time owners expect. At the bottom end, a light jet, something that seats 6 to 8 people and covers short domestic legs, might run $3 to $8 million to buy. It sounds like the entry-level option, and in some ways it is. But it's also the tier where the fixed costs of management, insurance, and a full crew barely make sense relative to the value of the asset itself. You end up paying nearly the same baseline overhead as someone with a much larger jet spread across a much smaller airplane, leave up to a mid-size or super mid-size cabin, something that can cross the country non-stop, and you're closer to $10 to $20 million. This is where most serious buyers actually land, because the ratio of fixed management cost to aircraft value starts to make sense, and the charter market for this size of cabin is genuinely liquid. At the top, the ultra-long range category, aircraft like a Gulfstream G650 or a Bombardier Global 6000, you're looking at $25 to $70 million. These are the aircraft that can fly nonstop from New York to Hong Kong. They're also the aircraft where every cost we're about to walk through, crew, insurance, maintenance, gets dramatically larger, simply because everything about the airplane is bigger, longer range, and more complex. So if scale is the advantage once you've picked your tier, what exactly are you paying for, and which piece of that payment actually keeps the lights on? You'll see a monthly management retainer. Depending on the size of the jet, that's typically $5,000 a month on the low end, up to $20,000 a month or more for the biggest cabins. Over a year, that's $60,000 to $250,000, just for baseline oversight, crew payroll administration, scheduling, and record keeping. Here's the part that surprises most owners. That retainer barely covers the management company's own internal labor cost to run it. It is not where the company makes its money. The bigger number that gets talked about is charter revenue. When the airplane isn't needed by the owner, it gets chartered out, and charter rates run anywhere from $3,000 an hour for a light jet to $15,000 an hour, or more for something in the heavy category. Sounds like real money. Except the standard industry split sends 80% of that revenue back to the owner to cover fuel, maintenance reserves, and landing fees, and only 20% stays with the management company as commission. Run the math on an $80,000 transcontinental charter. 20% of that is $16,000. Sounds fine until you subtract the cost of finding that customer, positioning the airplane, and running the trip. That $16,000 shrinks fast. So where's the real margin? It's hiding in places nobody's looking. Fuel purchasing spreads, a markup of 5 to 15% on maintenance oversight. Rebates from training providers when the company books pilot simulator slots in bulk. None of these show up on the invoice as a single dramatic line item. They accumulate quietly, transaction by transaction, across dozens of aircraft. And this is exactly why some companies deliberately underprice their management fee. They're not trying to make money on the retainer at all. They're trying to acquire the aircraft so they can put it to work generating charter volume and fuel margin. Other firms do the opposite. They charge $15,000 to $25,000 a month or more, deliberately limit charter flying, and sell owners on privacy and availability instead. Two completely different businesses, wearing the same uniform. Revenue sounds diversified: retainers, commissions, fuel spreads, maintenance markups. But there's one expense category that quietly eats more of that revenue than almost anything else combined. A long-range jet needs 4 to 6 full-time pilots to keep it available. Not 2, 4 to 6. Because pilots have duty limits, need days off, and need to stay current. Here's the thing people miss. These pilots get paid whether the airplane flies or not. If the owner doesn't fly for 3 weeks, the crew is still drawing full salary, still on health insurance, still covered under loss of license insurance. The airplane parked in the hangar is somehow still generating a payroll expense identical to a month of heavy flying. On top of base salary, every pilot needs recurrent simulator training once or twice a year at specialized centers run by companies like Flight Safety International or CAE. That training alone runs into the tens of thousands of dollars per pilot per year before you count travel and hotel costs for the week they're off flying and sitting in a simulator instead. And this labor market has gotten brutal. According to the 2025 NBAA compensation survey, audited by the accounting firm BDO, senior captain pay rose 12% in a single year, to an average of $164,000. Aviation department managers who don't even fly saw total cash compensation jump 30% to $205,000. And pilots flying ultra-long-range jets, the exact category we're talking about, are paid over 36% more than the average business aviation pilot. Why? Because after 2021, commercial airlines went on a hiring spree and pulled experienced captains straight out of business aviation cockpits. Every business jet operator had to raise pay just to keep their existing crews from walking across the ramp to a major airline. And here's the operational consequence nobody talks about. Some management companies have had to turn down new aircraft they were offered to manage, not because they lacked hangar space, but because they physically couldn't find enough qualified, insurable pilots to staff them. Payroll is predictable, at least. It's a known monthly number. What isn't predictable is the airplane itself. And that's where things get expensive fast. Maintenance on a business jet isn't optional and it isn't negotiable. It's triggered by flight hours and calendar dates set by the manufacturer. Full stop, whether or not it's convenient for the owner. A major scheduled inspection, the kind that comes around every 6 years or 12 years depending on the airframe, means stripping the cabin interior out, checking the airframe for corrosion at every structural point, testing every avionics system, and overhauling the landing gear. That single inspection can cost $1 million to $2 million or more, and the airplane can be grounded for several weeks at a specialized facility, weeks where it earns $0. While every fixed cost, the payroll, the hangar, the insurance, keeps running exactly as it did the week before. Then there are the engines. Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney Canada power plants eventually need overhauls that run into the millions of dollars per engine. To avoid a surprise bill of that size landing all at once, most owners enroll in an hourly maintenance program, paying somewhere between $500 and $800 for every hour flown into a reserve fund that covers the eventual overhaul. And then there's the one nobody can plan for: an unscheduled mechanical failure at some remote airport, what the industry calls an aircraft on ground event. Suddenly, you need a mobile repair team flown in, replacement parts air freighted across a continent, hotel rooms for a stranded crew, and possibly a subcharter flight just to get the actual passengers where they were going. One bad AOG event far from home can rack up tens of thousands of dollars in emergency costs in a single weekend, wiping out an entire year of management profit on that one tail. So the airplane finally comes out of the shop. It's airworthy. It's ready to fly and earn money. Now what? Here's where it gets interesting. Placing the aircraft on a Part 135 charter certificate lets it earn revenue when the owner isn't using it. But every single charter hour also adds wear, accelerates the next inspection, and shortens the life of expensive cabin components. More flying, more revenue, sure. But also more wear, sooner maintenance, and faster depreciation of interior finishes that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace. And then there's the scheduling collision nobody warns you about. Charter demand spikes at exactly the moments owners want their own airplane back: holidays, major sporting events, big conferences. The owner wants to fly to Aspen the same week a charter customer is offering top dollar for that exact airplane on that exact route. Give the trip to the charter customer and you risk the owner's trust. Give the airplane back to the owner and you walk away from real commission income. And if you commit the aircraft to a charter contract and then a mechanical issue delays it, the owner can be left stranded without their own jet during the 1 week a year they actually wanted it. That's the kind of failure that ends a management relationship permanently. So sometimes maximizing how often the airplane flies actually makes owners less happy, not more. Private charter is one way by nature. A customer flies from New York to Miami, and unless another paying customer happens to need the exact same airplane going the exact same direction immediately afterward, the jet has to fly back empty. These repositioning legs, what the industry calls deadhead flights, can make up 20 to 40% of total flight hours across an operator's fleet. Nearly half the flying, generating zero direct revenue, DePastures spend their days solving a puzzle that's basically a miniature version of what airline network planners do, except with a handful of aircraft instead of hundreds, and far less flexibility. Sometimes a management company will deliberately accept a charter leg that barely breaks even or even loses a little money, purely because it repositions the airplane into a high-demand market like Teterboro or Palm Beach, ahead of a much more profitable booking the next day. It's a calculated loss, not a mistake, and even a trip that looks profitable on paper can quietly become a loser. Landing and ramp fees at major hubs can run $500 to $3,000 per arrival. Winter operations require de-icing, which can cost anywhere from $2,000 to over $10,000 per application. If a crew runs up against their legal duty time limit mid-trip, the operator has to fly in a relief crew commercially, put them in hotels, and pay per diem, on top of everything else. Add it all up, and sometimes turning a charter trip down is the more profitable decision. Which sounds backwards until you've actually run the numbers on one bad leg. All of this operational complexity sits on top of one enormous, ever-present risk. Something goes catastrophically wrong. Hull values on these aircraft routinely exceed $50 million, and liability coverage on a serious accident can reach to the hundreds of millions. One accident can trigger simultaneous litigation involving the owner, the management company, the manufacturer, the passengers, and any charter broker who sold the seat. Everyone gets pulled into court at once. This is exactly why safety management systems, once treated as regulatory paperwork nobody wanted to fill out, have become a genuine competitive advantage. Top-tier safety ratings from organizations like Argus and Wyvern now function almost like a credit score for an operator. And increasingly, it's the insurance underwriters, not the management company, who decide who's allowed to fly. They set minimum experience thresholds, often 3,000 total flight hours and 500 hours in that specific aircraft type for a captain. If a pilot doesn't meet the insurer's bar, the policy simply won't cover them, and the management company has no choice but to walk away from that hire. Think about what that actually means for a business already struggling to find enough qualified crew. You can have a talented pilot, fully licensed, fully current, sitting available and ready to fly. And if that pilot is short of the insurer's hour threshold in that specific airframe, the airplane simply cannot legally carry passengers with them in the seat. Not because the FAA said no, because the underwriter said no. In an industry already fighting a labor shortage, that's an entire qualified pilot pool that's functionally invisible to you. And premiums themselves haven't been static. After a run of expensive claims across the industry, insurers pulled back capacity and pushed pricing higher across the board, particularly for hull values above $50 million, where a single total loss claim can wipe out years of premium collected from an entire book of business. That cost gets passed straight through the owner's bill, and it moves independently of anything the management company does well or poorly, Fuel is one of the largest variable costs in the entire operation, and it's also where scale turns directly into cash. Retail jet fuel at some airports can run $8 to $10 a gallon. A management company buying fuel in bulk across dozens of aircraft can lock in contract rates $1.50 to $3 a gallon below that retail price. A company running 5 aircraft gets a modest discount, maybe 50 cents a gallon. A company running 50 aircraft is buying millions of gallons a year and commands genuinely different pricing. Most of that discount gets passed to the owner, who sees real savings on their monthly bill. But the management company keeps a small spread on every gallon, often around 50 cents, and across a large fleet that spread adds up to serious money without ever raising the visible management fee. So if scale is this powerful, why doesn't every management company just grow as fast as possible? Because scheduling complexity doesn't grow at the same rate as the fleet, it grows faster. Managing pilot duty limits, maintenance dates, owner preferences, and charter bookings across 10 aircraft is manageable. Across 60 aircraft, the coordination problem multiplies in a way that isn't simply proportional, it compounds. And growth tends to force big infrastructure spending ahead of the revenue that's supposed to justify it. A 24-hour dispatch center, a dedicated safety department, layers of management, all built before the fleet has grown into the cost. Meanwhile, ultra-high net worth owners often want the opposite of institutional scale. They want a phone number that goes straight to someone senior who knows their preferences. As firms standardize procedures to handle more aircraft, that personal touch is often the first thing to erode. And it's exactly what a boutique firm managing a handful of clients can offer instead. Despite that tension, the market keeps consolidating. Large players like NetJets, Vista, and FlexJet have spent years acquiring smaller operators and building vertically integrated businesses that combine aircraft management, charter, maintenance, and even aircraft sales under one roof. The advantage is obvious once you see it. A client who buys a jet card gets cross-sold into ownership. That aircraft gets placed straight into the firm's own management fleet and charter program. Its maintenance and fuel purchases get routed through the company's own facilities. Every link in that chain that would otherwise go to an outside vendor instead stays inside the same company, capturing margin at every step. Think about what that does to the cost of winning a new client. An independent management firm has to advertise, network, and convince a skeptical owner to switch from whoever they're currently using, an expensive and slow process. A vertically integrated firm can simply take a charter customer it already has a relationship with, someone who's already flown on the brand, already trusts the safety record, and offer them ownership as the natural next step. The cost of acquiring that same client drops enormously because the trust was already built through an earlier, smaller transaction. Independent, standalone management firms increasingly have to pay retail rates for the same maintenance, hangarage, and fuel that the giants get at wholesale just to compete for the same clients, and they have to win every new owner from a cold start instead of an existing relationship. To understand why relationships matter more than transactions in this business, look at what happened to ZetaJet. ZetaJet built an all-Bombardier, large-cabin charter fleet, headquartered in Singapore with an office in California, and grew fast enough to look like one of the industry's genuine success stories. Then, in September of 2017, the company filed a lawsuit against its own ousted managing director, Jeffrey Cassidy, accusing him of fraud and misappropriation of company funds. Within days, ZetaJet filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. How does a company that looked this success from the outside collapse this fast from the inside? Court filings later alleged the misappropriation could have run as high as $30 million over 2 years, along with claims that Cassidy took kickbacks from an aircraft broker on jet purchases and misrepresented his own net worth to investors. When the bankruptcy court later rejected the company's reorganization financing, it was forced into full liquidation. Customer deposits and unpaid vendor bills, worth millions of dollars, were largely lost. A bankruptcy trustee later filed suit seeking to recover over $450 million from Bombardier and other parties involved in financing and selling the aircraft, arguing the business had effectively been insolvent almost from the moment it started. The lesson isn't that one executive was dishonest. It's that a business built entirely on trust, owner trust, investor trust, regulator trust, can look completely healthy right up until the moment that trust is shown to be misplaced. And then it doesn't fail slowly. It fails in a matter of weeks. Fraud isn't the only way this business ends. Sometimes it's simpler than that. The underlying pricing model just doesn't work, and nobody notices until it's too late. Jetit launched in 2018 with a fractional ownership program built around the Honda Jet, and it marketed headline rates of $1,600 an hour, a number that didn't include monthly management fees or the actual cost of ownership. That pricing fueled genuinely fast growth. By 2022, Jet had climbed to become the 12th largest private jet operator in the country by flight hours, up from 21st place just the year before. But a fractional program comes with a contractual promise. If an owner's own share of the fleet isn't available when they want to fly, the company has to find them another airplane, on someone else's certificate, at market rate. At one point, Jet had to spend over $20 million on these off-fleet charter flights just to keep that promise to its owners. The company shut down operations in 2023. It took more than 2 years for the final bankruptcy paperwork to be filed in December of 2025, and when it was, the numbers told the story plainly. $36.2 million in liabilities against just over $1 million in assets, most of which turned out to be pandemic-era tax credits, not cash. Over 200 companies were listed as unsecured creditors, from fuel suppliers to charter operators who had covered those off-fleet flights and were never paid back, to a public relations firm still owed over $30,000. Keep that number in mind, over 200 unpaid vendors, the next time a management company quotes you an hourly rate that sounds too good to be true. A pricing model that looks aggressive and customer-friendly on the surface can simply be a company quietly spending down its own solvency, one underpriced flight hour at a time, until there's nothing left to spend. So does this business work, or doesn't it? It depends entirely on which version of the year you get. Start with the optimistic case. A management company runs 100 aircraft. Average annual management retainer of $150,000 per aircraft brings in $15 million. Charter commissions across an actively flown fleet, assuming healthy demand and few disruptions, might add another $8 million. Fuel spread and maintenance markups across that same fleet could reasonably add $3 million more. Total revenue somewhere around $26 million. Subtract payroll for the dispatch and compliance staff, facility costs, insurance, and overhead, maybe $18 million, and you're left with a net profit in the range of $8 million. Respectable, in a business most outsiders assume is far more profitable than that. Now, the realistic case, the one where 2 or 3 things actually go wrong, because in this industry, something always does. A pilot shortage forces the company to decline managing 5 new aircraft it was offered, cutting the retainer revenue that growth was supposed to bring in. One aircraft has an unscheduled AOG event on a remote trip, costing $60,000 in emergency logistics that were never budgeted. A major inspection on 2 long-range aircraft runs slightly over estimate, adding another $600,000 combined. Insurance renews at a higher premium across the fleet because of an industry-wide claim spike, adding another $400,000 in fixed cost nobody controls. And deadhead flying, the empty repositioning legs that were already eating a third of total flight hours, ticks up slightly because 2 owners both want their aircraft back the same week a major charter booking falls through, leaving a gap in the schedule that never gets filled. None of these events are exotic. None of them require fraud or a crash or a scandal. They're simply the normal cost of doing business in a below-average year. Run that same 100 aircraft fleet through those numbers and net profit can fall from $8 million down to $2 million. Or, in a genuinely bad stretch, disappear into a loss entirely. The difference between the good year and the bad year isn't a rounding error. It's roughly $6 million on the exact same 100 aircraft, with the exact same clients, the exact same management fees on the exact same invoices. Nothing about the business model changed between those 2 years. Only the variables sitting outside the company's control did. A pilot shortage, 1 bad mechanical failure, 1 insurance renewal, and a few empty legs that didn't reposition the way they were supposed to. So after everything, where does the real money come from? Not the management fee alone, not charter commissions alone. It comes from stacking fleet scale, purchasing leverage, careful charter yield, and maintenance oversight together, and then holding on to that combination for years. Because losing even 1 aircraft owner doesn't just cost you 1 contract. It costs you the retainer, the charter inventory that aircraft added to your fleet, and the purchasing volume that kept your fuel and insurance rates low for everyone else. The hangar isn't the asset. The dispatch software isn't the asset. The asset is the years of trust an owner has to place in a company before they'll hand over an aircraft worth tens of millions of dollars, and simply trust that it will be flown safely, maintained properly, and billed honestly, without watching every single decision themselves. An aircraft management company isn't really in the business of flying airplanes. It's in the business of being trusted with someone else's very expensive, very fragile risk. The airplane is just what that trust happens to be wrapped around.